The voice under my bed said my name at 2:17 in the morning, and it sounded exactly like my mother on the night she died. I did not scream at first. I could not. I just lay there in the dark with my blanket pulled to my chin, staring at the ceiling I had stared at as a boy, listening to the old house breathe around me. The fan above my head turned with a slow, dry click. Rain tapped against the window in small, nervous fingers. Somewhere far down the hall, a floorboard groaned under no one's weight. Then the voice came again, soft and clear, from the black space beneath my bed. Daniel, not loud, not angry, almost gentle, like she had been waiting a long time for me to come home. My whole body locked. My mouth went dry. I had not heard my mother's voice in 16 years, not since the car accident on Miller Road, not since the night the sheriff stood on our porch with his hat in both hands and my father sat down on the stairs like his bones had left him. Or at least, that was the story I had lived with. That was the story my father told. That was the story the town believed. I was 30 now, back in Black Hollow only because my father had died the week before and somebody had to empty the house before the bank took it. I had no wife, no kids, no real reason to rush back to the city. Just a storage unit, a cheap apartment, and a life built carefully on not thinking too hard about childhood. The house looked smaller than I remembered when I arrived that afternoon, but at night it seemed huge again, full of corners and stale air and old grief. I had spent the whole day boxing clothes, stacking dishes, throwing out medicine with labels, so old the ink had faded. I had found my father's watch in the bathroom drawer, my mother's blue scarf in the attic, a photo album with half the pictures ripped out. By midnight, my nerves were already thin. By 2:17, I was no longer sure I was alone. I sat up slowly, forcing myself to breathe through the panic. Moonlight leaked through the curtains and drew pale bars across the rug. The room smelled like dust, wet wood, and the faint ghost of lavender from a candle my mother used to burn. I told myself it was memory making tricks. Grief. Exhaustion. I had barely slept since the funeral. But then the mattress dipped slightly beneath me, as if something below had shifted its weight. The voice whispered again, "Don't put your feet down." Every hair on my arms stood up. I pulled my legs tighter and stared at the floor, seeing nothing except moonlight and shadow. "Who's there?" I asked, but my voice sounded small, like a child's voice in a grown man's throat. There was a pause, and I heard what sounded like breathing under the bed. Slow, weak, human, please, the voice said. Not yet. My chest hurt. I reached for the lamp on the nightstand and snapped it on so fast I almost knocked it over. Warm yellow light rushed across the room, the bed, the dresser, the closet door, the moving shadows of tree branches on the wall. Nothing else. Nothing living. Nothing visible. I stared at the open space beneath the bed from where I sat. All I could see were 2 cardboard boxes, an old tennis shoe, and darkness pressed against the wall. I told myself to laugh. I told myself to get up, kneel down, and look. Instead, I stayed frozen, gripping the lamp so hard my fingers ached. Then, from the other end of the house, came the sound of the front door opening. I heard it clearly, the metal latch, the soft scrape of wood across the entry rug. My father was dead. I had seen the body at the funeral home. The house was empty. But now, someone was inside. I switched off the lamp at once and held my breath. The hallway beyond my room was dark. I could hear water dripping from a coat or umbrella near the front entrance. Then footsteps. Slow, heavy, familiar. They moved across the living room floorboards with the same slight drag I had heard every night of my childhood after my father's bad knee began to fail. One step, a pause, then another, coming deeper into the house. My heart kicked so hard it made me dizzy. "Daniel," the voice under the bed whispered, more urgent now. "Do not answer him. Him. Not it. Him." I looked at the bedroom door just as a shadow passed across the gap beneath it. I could see shoes, Large, wet, motionless, whoever was outside had stopped right in front of my room. For a long time, nothing moved. Even the rain seemed to hold back. Then came 3 soft knocks. I nearly broke from the sound alone. Not loud knocks, respectful ones, like a father checking on his son. "Danny," a voice said through the wood, low and rough and wrong. "You awake?" I felt all. The air leave my lungs. It was my father's voice. Not almost. Exactly. The same dry little catch on the second word. The same deep, tired tone that used to call me in for dinner. My eyes filled without warning. Fear did that sometimes. It pulled tears from places you forgot were open. I heard him rest his hand against the door. "Son," he said, "open up." I should have moved then. I should have jumped out the window or called the police or run screaming into the storm. But fear can pin you harder than ropes. It keeps you still because some part of you thinks stillness is safety. I sat there on the bed in my dead childhood room, listening to my dead father breathe on the other side of the door, while the voice under the bed shook and whispered my name again like a prayer. "Do not let him see you are listening to me." I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" I mouthed rather than spoke. There was silence below. Then, so soft I almost missed it. "I'm sorry." The doorknob turned a little. Not enough to open. Just enough to tell me the door was not locked. "Danny," my father said. And there was something terrible in how patient he sounded. Something that made my stomach fold in on itself. "You were always a good boy. Don't start this now." My mind flashed back without warning to being 8 years old, standing barefoot in the kitchen at midnight while my father washed something red from his hands and told me I had dreamed the scream I heard in the garage. I had buried that memory so deep it felt like someone else's life, but there it was, alive again, sharp as broken glass. I had been holding a glass of water. I remembered the trembling of it. My father had looked at me with a calm face and said, "Your mother left, you understand? She left." I had nodded because children will agree to almost anything when fear speaks with a parent's voice. Outside my bedroom now, something scratched lightly along the door as if a fingernail dragged down the painted wood. I forced myself to speak. "Dad," I hated how small I sounded. The breathing outside stopped. Then came a smile in the voice. I could hear it. "That's right." I felt sick. Under the bed, the hidden voice let out a tiny sound that could have been a sob. "He lies," it whispered. "He always lies." I got off the bed then, slowly, keeping my feet pulled up until the very last second. When my soles touched the rug, nothing grabbed me. No cold hands, no teeth, just thick silence. I took one careful step back from the bed, then another. My father, or whatever wore his voice, laughed softly outside the door. "Still scared of the dark, Danny?" I moved toward the closet and yanked it open. Empty hangers swayed. My old baseball glove sat on the top shelf, a shoebox full of letters my mother had written me from work trips when I was little rested in the corner. I had found it earlier and not had the courage to open it. Now, with shaking hands, I pulled the box down and dumped it on the floor. Envelopes slid everywhere, some addressed to me in my mother's round. Neat writing, some never mailed, some sealed. One open letter lay face up on the rug. The paper had yellowed, but the ink was clear. It was not addressed to me. It was addressed to whoever finds this before he does. The room tilted. My hands shook so hard I almost tore the page. I read by lamplight while the thing outside my door waited. If you are reading this, it means I did not leave. It means he told Daniel I left. It means he still has the house. I am hiding these where he never cleans. If I disappear, he did it. He says the voices in the house are making him do things. He says something under Daniel's bed speaks to him at night and tells him how to keep us. I'm writing this while he sleeps. If I can get Daniel out, I will. If not, God forgive me. I had to stop reading because my vision blurred. I heard the doorknob turn again, harder this time. "What do you have there?" my father asked, suddenly less patient. The sweetness had gone. The real voice was pushing through now. The voice I remembered from the nights when glass broke downstairs. The voice that could make even the walls seem smaller. I backed toward the bed, letter in hand. "She didn't leave," I whispered. No answer came from the hall, but the silence felt full of teeth. Then the door slammed once from the outside, hard enough to rattle the frame. "Open it," he said. "She poisoned you against me, same as always." My head swam. My mother had been dead, missing, gone, not left, not maybe, not probably. A cold truth was crawling up inside me, slow and unbearable. My knees almost gave out. Under the bed came a sound like weak knocking from below the floorboards. "Daniel," the voice whispered, and now I knew why it sounded so familiar. Not because it was exactly my mother's voice as I remembered it, but because it was her voice after pain, after years, after darkness. The loose board in the closet. "Hurry." Another slam hit the door. The cheap lock groaned. I dropped to my knees in the closet and clawed at the floorboards. The third board from the left shifted under my fingers. I pried it up and found a narrow gap beneath. Inside was a ring of old keys, a kitchen knife wrapped in cloth, and a stack of photographs held together with a rubber band, turned brittle with age. I grabbed the photos first. They showed the garage, the basement door, bruises on my mother's arm, the inside of a crawl space beneath the house. The last photo was blurred, but I could still see enough. A hand reaching up from darkness, a silver bracelet around the wrist, my mother's bracelet. The bedroom door burst inward so hard it hit the wall. I spun around with the knife in one hand and the photos in the other. A man stood in the doorway in dripping black clothes. At first, my mind insisted it was my father. Same shoulders, same jaw, same bad knee. But then the lamplight touched his face fully and the illusion broke. The skin was too loose, the smile too wide, the eyes too deep, as if something had learned my father by wearing him from the inside out. Rainwater ran from his sleeves onto the floor. He looked at the photographs and hissed, not like a man, but like something angry to be remembered. "She should have been quiet," he said. I backed away until the bed frame hit behind my legs. "What are you?" I asked. He tilted his head. "What your father fed." The room went cold. Every memory I had pushed away came flooding back at once. My father standing in my doorway at night, whispering to the dark under my bed, my mother crying in the laundry room, a smell like dirt coming through the vents, the sound of scratching under the floor. I realized then that whatever stood before me had not been my father all these years. It had been something the house kept, something my father had bargained with, something that wanted a family the way mold wants walls. It took one limping step into the room. "He asked me to keep you," it said. "He loved you." He was weak. She fought. The thing smiled wider. "She's still fighting." I looked down at the bed. The mattress trembled. From beneath it came a hard, desperate pounding. Not on the wood, on the underside of the mattress itself, as if hands were pressing up from a place that should not exist. The creature moved toward me. I slashed with the knife. It caught my wrist in a grip like iron and laughed when the blade only nicked its cheek. The cut did not bleed. It opened, dark and wet, and then slowly pulled shut. I screamed and kicked free, falling sideways onto the bed. The creature lunged. The whole frame jerked violently. One of the wooden slats beneath me cracked. Then another. A pale hand burst up through the torn dust cloth under the mattress and seized the creature's ankle. The scream that came from it shook the room. Another hand appeared, thin, bruised, human. Then a face pushed through the darkness under the bed, not rising into the room the way a body should, but emerging from a depth that could not exist beneath a normal frame. My mother's face, older than when I last saw her, sharper, half-starved. eyes full of terror and love. Her silver bracelet hung loose on her wrist. I could not breathe. "Daniel," she cried, and all at once I was 7 again, reaching for her in a crowd. The creature slammed itself against the wall, dragging her halfway out, but she would not let go. Her fingers dug into its leg like hooks. Blood, or something blacker, spread across the rug. "Run," she screamed. I could not move. My whole life had been this missing shape, this empty chair, this wound with no body in it, and now she was here, real and impossible, and breaking in front of me. "Mom," I said, and it came out like a child's sob. The creature turned its head and looked at me with my father's ruined smile. "You see," it said, "that is why he kept you blind. Love makes openings." It lunged for me again, but my mother pulled with a strength that did not belong to her thin body. The bed frame snapped. The floor beneath it groaned. Then, with a crack like a tree splitting in winter, the boards under the bed gave way and a hidden cavity opened below. A smell rushed out so awful I gagged. Wet earth. Rot, old blood. The creature lost its balance and fell to one knee. My mother dragged herself farther into the room, one arm still locked around its leg. Below the broken floor, I saw a narrow space between the beams, lined with old blankets, chains, and little things that made the world stop. My red toy truck, my mother's scarf, a child's sock, a row of teeth in a jelly jar. This thing had lived under us. All those nights, all those years, it had listened to us sleep. My mother looked at me once, quickly, and I saw everything in that look. Apology, terror, endless love. "I couldn't get out," she said, voice shaking. "I tried. I stayed because of you," the creature roared and slammed her head against the bedpost. Blood ran into her eye. I moved then, not because I was brave, because there are moments when fear burns away and leaves only the simple animal truth of love. I grabbed the lamp and smashed it over the creature's head. Glass exploded. Darkness swallowed the room except for moonlight and lightning. The creature howled and turned on me, and in that flash of white sky, I saw its real face under my father's skin. Something raw and ancient, like a starving child, stretched into the shape of a man. It reached for my throat. My mother drove the knife into its side. Once, twice. It shrieked and struck her so hard she vanished backward toward the opening under the bed. "Mom!" I dropped to the floor and caught her wrist just before she slipped into the black cavity below. The creature stumbled, leaking darkness, then began to smile again, even with the knife buried in it. "If she leaves," it whispered, "she dies." My mother looked up at me, and I saw that she already knew. Maybe she had always known. Her body was cold. Too cold. The kind of cold that belongs to things kept away from sun too long. "Listen to me," she said. Her voice was fading under the storm, but I heard every word. "Your father found it in the walls before you were born. He fed it animals first, then pieces of us. Fear, silence, lies. It wanted a child. He loved you enough to refuse that part. Not enough to save me." Tears ran down my face and dropped onto hers. "I can pull you out." Even as I said I knew I was lying. Her body was stuck deeper than I could see, tangled in that impossible dark. The creature crawled toward us, dragging one broken leg. "Daniel," my mother whispered. I kept calling your name so it would remember you were loved. I shook my head, sobbing now, holding her harder. "Please." She smiled then, and it was the saddest thing I have ever seen, because it was still my mother's smile, warm even through pain. "The lesson was always simple," she said. "What we hide to survive can grow big enough to eat a whole family." Then her eyes shifted past me to the creature. Something changed in her face. Resolve. The same look she used to wear before lifting heavy grocery bags or standing between me and my father's anger. With her free hand, she grabbed the knife, still lodged in the creature's side, and ripped it downward. The creature screamed. The floor shook. The dark cavity yawned wider beneath us, pulling air and dust and broken wood inward. I lost my grip on the floor and nearly fell with them. My mother tightened her hold on my hand one last time. "Live honest," she whispered, "even when it hurts." Then she let go on purpose. She fell backward into the darkness with the creature clutched against her, and the sound they made going down was not a scream exactly, but a long, tearing cry, like a house finally admitting what it had swallowed. The hole snapped shut with a blast of dust and splinters that threw me across the room. When I woke, dawn was bleeding gray through the curtains. The storm had passed, the bedroom was wrecked, the bed broken, the floor scarred, but the cavity was gone, just old boards and dust and silence. In my fist was my mother's silver bracelet, bent and cold. The sheriff found me sitting on the porch 3 hours later, barefoot, cut up, covered in dirt, staring at the road. They searched the house. They found bones in the craw, bee space under the foundation. Some animal, some human. They found my mother's letters, the photographs, enough to reopen everything. The town got its answer at last, or as much of one as towns ever get. They said my father had kept my mother prisoner. They said grief and guilt had made me imagine the rest. Maybe that is easier for people to live with. Maybe monsters are more comfortable when they stay human-sized. I did not argue. I buried my mother beside the empty stone that had waited for her all those years. The casket was closed. There was not much to bury. At the service, people cried for the girl they remembered, for the woman they never looked for hard enough, for the life that vanished inside a house everyone passed without seeing. I cried for all of it. For her, for the child I had been, for my father too, in a way, because love without courage had turned him into a door something evil could walk through. I sold the land to no one. The county burned the house down after the investigation, and I stood at the edge of the field and watched the flames take the roof, the walls, the rooms, the bed, the years. When the fire was brightest, I thought I heard my name once more in the wind. Not scared, not trapped, just soft, just close, like someone saying goodbye after waiting far too long in the dark. I still sleep with the light on some nights. I still wake at 2:17 and listen before I remember where I am, but I never keep secrets in my chest anymore, no matter how badly they ache, because I know what grows in silence. I know what waits under the bed when love is not spoken out loud, and sometimes, in the deepest part of night, when the room is still and the world feels empty enough to break, I touch the bent silver bracelet on my bedside table and remember that the most terrifying thing in that house was not the monster under my bed, but the years we spent pretending, and she was not there.